So, just a few days ago, it really looked like we were seeing a historic peace deal for Gaza. But today, that whole deal is on the brink of complete collapse. So, what on earth happened? How did a moment of hope unravel so fast? That's what we're going to break down.
And this is the statement that just blew everything up. A really stunning public declaration from a senior Hamas official on Al Jazeera, no less. You know, it's like someone just slammed on the brakes of the entire peace process, throwing the whole region right back into uncertainty.
So yeah, that's the big question, right? It feels like whiplash. One minute, we're seeing hostages returned, we're hearing world leaders cheering, and the next, we're right back on the brink of conflict. How did we get here? Let's dig in.
Okay, so to really get what's going on, we have to rewind a little bit and look at what this deal was supposed to be. This was the Sharm el-Sheikh Accord, brokered with help from Egypt and the US, and believe me, at the time, it was hailed as this huge, monumental breakthrough.
It was actually a pretty straightforward two-step plan. And phase one, it actually worked. All the Israeli hostages and their remains were returned. It was such a big deal and so difficult to pull off that even US President Donald Trump gave Hamas public praise for their cooperation. But that's pretty much where all the good news ends.
Right, so phase one is done. Check. Phase two should be kicking off, but instead we just get crickets. And then we get that bombshell announcement. So why? Why would Hamas risk everything by refusing to disarm? Well, their official line is kind of, hey, nobody directly asked us to, but come on, the real reasons, they go way, way deeper than that.
Hamas basically puts four cards on the table. This isn't just a simple no, it's a strategic move. They're saying, look, this is a negotiation. We're also just trying to survive. Disarming? That's not who we are. And on top of all that, they're pointing the finger right back at Israel, claiming they broke their promises first.
So let's take that survival point, this militia threat. You got to try to see it from their point of view for a second. They believe that Israel is actively arming and funding rival gangs inside Gaza. So for them, putting down their guns isn't about peace. It's basically signing their own death warrant. They think they'll just get picked off one by one. And that leads right into this identity crisis, which this quote just perfectly captures. How can Hamas fight for 2 years only to surrender its weapons? He's saying the armed struggle is their identity. To them, the guns aren't just tools, they are Hamas. Take away the weapons, and in their minds, the entire movement just evaporates.
Okay, let's flip this over. Because a huge part of Hamas's argument is that Israel was never serious about this deal to begin with. They claim Israel has been actively trying to sabotage it from day one. So let's look at the evidence they're pointing to.
So check this out. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that the whole dynamics changed the very instant that last hostage's body was returned. The second that happened, Hamas lost its biggest bargaining chip. And suddenly, in Israel's eyes, they weren't a negotiating partner anymore. They were just a vulnerable target. And if you want a perfect, stark example, just look at the Rafah crossing. The promise was, we're opening it all up. People, vital goods, everything. But the reality on the ground, reportedly passage is only for 50 people a day and no goods are allowed in at all. So in essence, the siege continues.
So when you put all these pieces together, it starts to look like a strategy of maximum pressure. Hamas says Israel is blocking aid to keep them weak, maintaining a military buffer zone, the yellow line, that they never planned to leave, and fueling those internal conflicts. All while the world's attention is conveniently focused on the crisis with Iran.
All right, let's pull the camera back for a second, because you absolutely cannot understand this whole mess without talking about the primary broker of the deal, US President Donald Trump. His position here just adds a whole new layer of complexity and contradiction.
So on one hand, Trump needs this deal to work. Badly. It's arguably his biggest foreign policy win. He was so invested, he actually went on his own social media platform to publicly praise Hamas for their role. I mean, that tells you everything about how important this is to him.
But then you have this, a statement reported by Politico where President Trump made it crystal clear that Hamas will be disarmed the good way or the bad way. It's a total contradiction, right? He's basically saying, I need your cooperation and I'm going to disarm you. By force, if needed, all in the same breath. And yeah, the clock is definitely ticking. Reports suggest Trump has set a rough deadline of about 2 to 3 months. The thinking is that once the Iran crisis is handled, his administration is going to turn its full, undivided attention back to Gaza. And you have to assume his patience for negotiations might have run out by then. So this brings us to the really critical question. What happens next? If this deal completely falls apart, the consequences won't just be limited to Gaza. We are talking about a shockwave that could ripple across the entire Middle East.
You're really looking at a dangerous domino effect if this fails. For Gaza, it could mean a devastating return to all-out war. For the mediators, Egypt, Qatar, Turkey, it's a massive blow to their credibility. For Israel, it's a renewed security nightmare. And for Donald Trump, it's the collapse of his signature achievement. But honestly, the most terrifying risk, which sources say is being discussed again, is not just war. It's the revival of these old plans for the mass forced displacement of Gaza's population into the Sinai Desert. It's a scenario that would create an unimaginable humanitarian catastrophe and destabilize the region for a generation.
And so that leaves us here with this final, haunting question. When one side sees disarmament as suicide and the other sees it as completely non-negotiable, where is the path forward? In a landscape just littered with broken promises, is a genuine, lasting peace even possible? Or is this tragic cycle of conflict just inevitable?